In today's video, I wanted to show you some of my dice from my extensive collection. These are dice that I use to play Dungeons and Dragons. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about the characters that I have played and kind of associated with these different sets of dice. So I will be switching to an overhead view so you can get a bit of a better look, and there'll be lots of nice clicky, clacky sounds as well as some rambling, I'm sure. So without further ado, let's switch views and get started with our show and tell. Alright, so here we are in our overhead setup. And we'll just get started with our first character. Got little labels on the boxes here. You don't need to read them, they're just so I know that I'm grabbing the right one. So, my first character, her name is Alwyn. She is a half-elf bard in the College of Creation. She has freckles and kind of like chin-length, wavy red hair. She's only 16, and she wears like very Celtic-inspired attire with lots of like greens and kind of Celtic knot patterns and things like that. So her primary weapon is that she fights with a saber sword and then also plays the flute for her bard magic. So she is very energetic and talks a lot. Very classic, like outgoing bard. A lot of people likely find this off-putting, but she's not oblivious to that. However, she isn't really self-conscious and she doesn't really care that people don't like that about her. So just very sort of happy-go-lucky attitude. In this campaign that she was in, we wanted to have like more simple characters that weren't all, like big crazy heroes. So she doesn't have like a dramatic backstory, but everybody in this campaign was playing like talented but unassuming teenagers who had to save their town after everyone got turned into berry bushes while our characters were away at a festival. So she had a pretty normal, loving home life before that. And the dice that I have matched with Alwyn are this clear base, and they have green and silver metallic flakes and gold lettering, and I think they kind of represent her bright, fun attitude pretty well, with the green for like the Celtic inspirations and the gold to bring in the warm coloring from her hair. So let's give our D20 a roll here and see what we get. Oh, not starting off strong. We rolled a 1. Oh, that's too bad. Alright, well, sorry, Alwyn. That's it for you. Our next character has gone by a couple of different names. Originally her name was Anna Thyman and went by Anna, but more recently in a different campaign I played her in, she just went by Eslin. Simplified the name a little bit. Oops. So I'll just call her Anna. She is a Triton, so like a underwater water person. She was a cleric of the Tempest domain. She was involved, like, her stuff was related to storms. And I themed her after, like, a deep sea creature. So I wanted her to look less human than most Tritons. She has, like, very pale, almost translucent, kind of reflective, like fish scale skin. Very large eyes, doesn't really have a nose, and mostly bald, except for some flexible fins on her head. I think one of the photos that I used for inspiration was actually concept art for Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides for the mermaids. Not what they actually ended up looking like, but some concept art. And I also like to imagine that she has some bioluminescence, similar to like a comb jelly, just because I think that is so cool. So she fights with a trident, so Triton with a trident, as well as, magic as a cleric. And as far as her personality, she's pretty curious and friendly, but not, like, open about herself. She's more of, like, observational scientist who is interested in learning about things, as opposed to, like, talking about herself with other people, which is kind of based on the fact that she was sent as a cultural researcher because her people are working on making a treaty with different land kingdoms. So it was her job to observe and report the land people's cultures to aid in that process. So these dice are a clear base with some holographic shimmer, and maybe the d6 will show it better, but inside there is like this dyed moss, and it's dyed a very dark blue color, and some of the ink from that is bleeding a little bit into the clear base. There's gold numbers, and I chose this dice because I feel like the moss in there really looks like underwater plants, and the deepness of the color really makes me think of, like very deep underwater. Yeah, alright. Let's roll our d20. A little better than Alwyn. We've got here a 12. I love the way the light shines off the facets of the dice. Alright. Thank you, Anna. So my next character is actually my current D&D character. And her name is Avdanya, but I just call her Danny. I often like to give my characters these big, long, interesting sounding names, but can't be bothered to say them all the time or make people say them, so a common theme with my characters is that they'll have a much shorter nickname. And Danny is a tiefling, and she's a warlock with a fiend patron. And to demonstrate her appearance a little bit, I actually, for Danny and a few of my other characters, have miniatures to show you. So this is my miniature of Danny, and my brother painted this one for me. I think he did a really good job. So Danny has light pink skin and very curly brown hair that goes down like past her shoulders. Her horns are curled around her head, kind of like a ram. and she dresses in a very elegant and expensive style with just a hint of like gothic inspiration. With Danny, most of my characters are pretty good aligned, but I wanted to do something different for her, and she's definitely more of like a neutrally aligned character for sure. Her primary weapon is magic, classic Eldritch Blast Warlock, and her charisma. So she is a character that was built a lot for roleplay situations. So she has a lot of charisma skills like persuasion, intimidation, deception, stuff like that. She is very business-minded and always negotiates the price of items, but she doesn't haggle, she negotiates. She has a calm level exterior, but can be a little bit sarcastic or snarky with people. She can kind of look down on people sometimes, not because she, like, of them not having things or wealth, but for how they choose to behave. And she is from a wealthy merchant family that deals in textiles. And several generations ago, her family made a literal deal with the devil to ensure their business success. And as you can imagine, any business that is willing to make demonic deals is also not entirely opposed to somewhat under-the-table practices in other areas. And part of what this devil received in return is the ability to create half-human offspring in the hope that they would have enough magical acumen to become warlocks for him. And Danny was one such offspring. Thus, her patron is actually her father. So Danny is not particularly pleased with this arrangement. Not because she has any moral qualms necessarily with the things she's being asked to do, but just that she wants her personal freedom and not to be trapped kind of doing what somebody else tells her to do for the rest of her life. So the dice that I picked for her are metallic, and they're like a black metal. And on them they have these green vines and pink roses. I think that both the metallic and the dark color kind of represent Danny's harder edge, but the roses match her more feminine and literal pink appearance. So let's give it a roll for Danny. 13. Hopefully our rolls just keep getting better because, they can't get worse than what we started with. 13 for Danny. Alright, let's put these back in the bag. Next, we have Demifay. Demifay is a centaur. She's a monk. Way of the Kensi. She has a medium brown body with like white spots and splashes, and long dark hair she wears in a French braid. It's very lean but muscular. Her primary weapon is her staff, and she also has a set of like brass knuckles. Not brass, but that's essentially what they are. And she kicks with her hooves, those unarmed monk strikes. She is very stoic and sees things in black and white terms. There's not a lot of gray area for her. She's very disciplined and highly principled. She wants to do good, but her idea of what good is very utilitarian. So she's not unempathetic, but she is in control of her emotions enough to not be controlled by them and do what she believes is for the greater good rather than what feels right in the moment, kind of thing. She was born into a caste society where the people were divided by the color of the equine part of their body, where mixed-colored individuals were like a laborer class, almost like slaves. And faced with these injustices, she left home at a relatively young age and joined a monk order. And that's where she picked up her utilitarian ethics. And after she was there for several years and learned a lot, the order was raided and closed by force. And after this, as an alternative to prison labor, she decided to become a gladiator, where she toured around to different places to do fights for entertainment, basically. She eventually escaped, and that is when she joined the others in her party. And her purpose, she's not really sure, but it's kind of to just go around doing what she believes she can, because she doesn't have much connection to anything else at the start of her adventure. So these dice are like a swirl between a metallic orangey yellow and black with silver numbers. I think these dice are probably the least well matched or specific to any of the characters I have today. But I do think that the yellow and black kind of represents her mixed coloring. And these are more neutral tones, which she's definitely not a flashy person. So that's why I chose these dice. It's much harder to match dice to subdued characters, I think, than to ostentatious ones. Alright, so let's roll. Oh, 17, that's good. That's much better. So we've rolled a 17 for Demofay. Very nice. Alright. My next character is Io, and I've pre-opened this box that the dice are in a little bit because it is quite hard to open since I ripped off the pull tab by accident. There we go. So here are my dice for Io. Io is a Kalashtar, which is a race that's like very human in appearance for the most part, but they have like extra abilities regarding telepathy and dreams. I think they're a little more silvery colored usually than humans. So Io is a druid in the circle of stars. She has a little bit of a bog witchy appearance, almost like a goth bog witch, almost. She has long, unkempt hair, and her clothes are very drapey and organic. And she's covered in complex tattoos that are actually a star map. Her primary weapon is usually just her hands. She can manifest claws and spellcasting as well. Wild shape, very occasionally. And she has a spectral bow. she's very aloof. She really only speaks when spoken to. And to answer questions, but she's also very impulsive. And is definitely a skulker. So she was raised in a druidic community that was governed by a group where each of the druids represented a different facet of nature. And the previous person who occupied the role that represented the night sky was her mentor, but they suddenly disappeared, and Io did not feel ready to take on that role. So instead, she ran away to try and find her mentor. These dice they have an iridescent purple base, the clear layer on top. Between the two layers is holographic glitter, as well as some swirls and a metallic ball, which really looks like a planet, like it's meant to be kind of like a view of a galaxy, which is why I chose these dice for Io, because of the star theme, and as well the dark purple kind of matches her dark aesthetic. I actually got these dice as a gift from members of the lab that I worked in when I did my master's degree, and they gave them to me when I graduated, so that was really kind. And I just think these are so cool and very unique dice. Alright, let's give Io a roll. 12. Okay, I will put these dice away and place them back into their box. I place them back so carefully, but they never actually stay in their little holes once the box is closed. But I will do it nicely for you. Plus, I really like the sounds that the box makes. Next, we have Niobe, and I also have a miniature for her, which I'll show off in a second after I get her dice out. So Niobe is a an Asmar, and she is a paladin. I am going to be honest, I don't remember what oath she is, and I couldn't find it anywhere. Niobe's one of my older characters, and I played her in a campaign with people that I don't usually play with, and we played with a lot less online tools, so she's not as well preserved digitally. But Niobe has very pale skin and gray eyes, light gray hair. She's almost never seen without her full plate armor. She's definitely the most masculine leaning and style characters that I've ever played. She fights with a longsword and shield, as well as her magic. And this character was actually inspired by this miniature, which my husband, well, he was my boyfriend at the time, but my husband painted it for me, and the character was inspired by the miniature. And I did actually alter this miniature so that the wings can come off and they're just attached by a little magnet. One, it makes her easier to transport, but two, it also means she doesn't have to be full angel ASMR the whole time. So the only difference is that Niobe has much of a more blue palette than this miniature would suggest, which is purple. But again, the character was inspired by the miniature, not the other way around. So here are her dice. Niobe is quiet and pretty awkward. She likes being around people, but she isn't really sure how to talk or relate to them. She has a very intense desire to do the right thing, but she's often not sure what the right thing is. She was raised by a frost giant and doesn't know her birth family, but now she's on a holy quest to try and figure out her purpose, who she is, and to look for her family. The dice I chose for her I bought them unpolished. They were sold as raw, so the numbers were also unpainted, and they're in this icy blue with a silver shimmer. And I painted the numbers in a very light blue color. And I think the color and unpolished texture kind of look like frosty ice. And the sharp corners, and again the unpolishedness of the dice, I think, sort of go with how Niobe doesn't really know herself. She's unfinished, just like the dice. Alright, let's roll. A lot of the dice sets you'll see have a little kraken on the high face of the D20. That's just the brand that I got a lot of my dice from, Kraken Dice. Alright, let's roll this for Niobe. 7. Niobe actually had a negative dexterity roll, so it was not uncommon for me to technically get a negative initiative when rolling, but I think that was kind of a fun quirk of her character. She was more strength-based anyways. Alright, say goodbye to Niobe. Leave with her wings. Bye-bye. Next we have Aurelia. Aurelia is a half-elf, and she's a ranger, subclass Drake Warden. Aurelia has long, light blonde hair and very tanned skin. Kind of imagine, California sort of surfer coloring. She dresses in greens and browns, very feminine though, and has a black drake companion named Zirka. Zirka, T-Z-E-R-K-A. I always thought that was very fun to say. Aurelia is kind and polite, and generally somewhat soft-spoken, but will not be pushed around. So, just because she has a soft, feminine exterior does not mean she's not ready to throw down if provoked. father was new to town, and he seemed like a good man, but that he was running from something. He also had strange abilities that were related to dragons. And not long after Aurelia was born, there was a dragon attack on their village, which caused Aurelia's father to leave for some unknown reason. A couple of years later, Aurelia and her mother were ousted because Aurelia started to demonstrate some of the same abilities as her father, and the people were afraid that she would bring about another attack. So, after traveling around for a while, they found a small town made up of mostly misfits from other places, and that's where Aurelia grew up. Recently, her mother passed away, and Aurelia has set off in the world looking for answers, because there was nothing tying her down anymore. So these dice are a clear base with some shimmer and splashes of turquoise and orange. And then the numbers are in gold. I thought the shimmer in these dice specifically was like very femme looking. And the blue-green splashes were kind of like the nature aspect of being a ranger, and then orange for the fire of dragons. So we'll roll for Aurelia. 6. Not so good. 6 for Aurelia. There we go. So, next character we have is Remy. And Remy is also a half-elf. She is an evocation wizard. She was in a rather short-lived campaign, so there's not too much to say about her. But she is somewhat short, straight white hair and a chin-length bob, and she has bangs. She also has a scar that covers the left half of her face from severe blunt force trauma, and she can't see out of that eye. She dresses like a very classic cutesy witch, hat and all, in like a very dark academia color palette. And she also has a pet / familiar that is a blink dog, who's also missing his left eye, and that's because we had only 2 people as players in this campaign, and we needed the extra combatant to make combat a little less volatile. So she primarily uses her spellcasting and dog in combat. And Remy loves learning and knowledge, but she's very anxious to meet and talk to people. She doesn't have a lot of experience doing that. She definitely rambles when she's nervous. She grew up in a relatively well-off family, and both her parents were magic scholars of some kind. When she was relatively young, she had an accident where she fell over a waterfall, which is how she got the scar on her face. She was found downstream, but no one is really sure how she actually ended up there on the shore instead of drowning. And for the rest of her childhood after that, she was very sheltered, and her parents got her sort of a when she became an adult, she was able to leave and planned to attend wizard school to develop her skills, but the inciting incident of the campaign pulled her away while she was en route to said school, and she wasn't able to actually get there. So these dice are half clear, well, mostly clear, with like a black base, and there is between those layers I'm not sure if I can really capture it well, gold creature head inside, and I think it looks quite canine. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be a dragon, but I don't think it looks like a dragon. And then the numbers were originally red, but I repainted them in silver to go more with Remy's style. And I think the dark color scheme matches her kind of clothing choices. And I like the fact that I think it looks like it has a dog head inside. Relatively vicious dog. Kind of speaks for itself. Are there any other of these that kind of show up better? Usually the D6 is the best. Oh, maybe you can see kind of more on this side of the D4. Yeah. Alright, let's give Remy a roll. 16 for Remy. Next we have Scarlet Wind and your dice. And I also have a miniature for Scar, as she was referred to. So, Scar is a tabaxi. And she is a rogue with the inquisitive archetype. Scar is a short-haired calico coat and wears like burgundy red leather armor. And often wears a tattered cape with the hood up that has little holes for her ears. And this miniature actually was painted by me. So it's my miniature contribution. Now, she dual wields short swords, as you can see. And she's kind of goofy, but not in like an intentional way. Very chatty, animated when she speaks, and will definitely be the first person to suggest a crazy plan that would never work. Scar's mother was actually a lady of the night, so Scar grew up without a lot of supervision, but kind of roamed the streets where she learned to get scrappy and fight. But the fact that she had a safe enough place to go back to kind of protected her from the darker aspects of street life. So these dice are kind of a hodgepodge of warm-toned, iridescent, swirly dice. And I think that the different colors kind of tie into that her coat is different colors, but also is, kind of a, not crazy, but like energetic, wild person. And then, throwing in the red tones there for her name. So we'll roll the d20 here for Scar. 8. That feels appropriate because despite having a very high dexterity score, Scar was known for doing some pretty clumsy things. Once they were fighting some goblins, and she tried to jump, onto the edges of a pot of soup to strike a dramatic pose, and sort of straddle this cauldron, but she failed her acrobatics check and ended up in said soup. So I think that anecdote illustrates her personality pretty well. Although, to be fair, that's due to my bad rolling, not her ability scores. Okay, bye, Scar. The next character that I have to go over you with is named 6, like the number 6. And it is also the last miniature that I have to show you as well. And 6 is my longest played character. The campaign that I played her in, I believe we started at level 2 or 3 and played all the way to level 20. So she is very close to my heart, and probably will be the longest section in this video. But I will limit what I have to tell you to her backstory from before the campaign and not what happened during it, so that we're not here for too long. So, 6 is a human. She's my only character that's a human. She's a wild magic sorcerer. And the first thing that you notice about 6 is that she is only about 12 years old. She has long, straight black hair and violet eyes, and she always wears clothes that are far too big for her. On her left hand, she has some sort of arcane medallion embedded under the skin of her palm. And around the medallion, the vasculature has taken on somewhat of a blackened quality. So this is the miniature that I made for 6. I also painted this one myself. The paint job is not excellent, but I am quite proud of the modifications that I did to the miniature to make it look more like a 12-year-old. So I removed the bust and also took a section out of the legs to make her shorter and look more adolescent. So there she is, using her magic. So 6 is a young girl, but she is a bit more mature than her years would suggest because of her difficult childhood. But she still manages to hold on to her youthful optimism despite everything. She always wants to help people and do what is right, but she can be somewhat short-sighted and is always compelled to fix whatever problem is right in front of her instead of being able to see the larger picture. Though she is young and vivacious, her upbringing has left a darkness inside of her that she actively tries to suppress. I don't usually go for like very traumatized characters, but 6 is definitely traumatized with a capital T. So 6 and her twin sister were found on a boat as babies, and none of the other people on the boat were alive any longer. They were both taken to an orphanage nearby, and after a couple of years, when 6 and her sister were old enough to show magical aptitude, they were sent to what was framed as a school for magically gifted children. In actuality, it was run by a woman who was trying to harness the children's magical powers and performed experiments on them to this end. This place is where 6 acquired the medallion on her hand, and she was also given the designation 36 because she was the 36th child, which was shortened into the name she goes by, 6. Eventually, the experiments started to focus on using resonance between 2 test subjects to try and amplify their power. Being twins, 6 and her sister were excellent candidates for this. One day, during one of these resonance experiments, when 6 was about 9 years old, there was a massive discharge of energy. 6 fell unconscious. When she came to, the entire complex had been leveled, and her sister, along with everyone else, was nowhere to be found. It was just 6 left alone in the ruins. Eventually, she made her way to a nearby town where she joined a group of young street urchins and spent the next few years living with them until she joined her adventuring party. And there was one guy in the adventuring party who came kind of like her pseudo-father figure. So, the dice that I have for 6 are like a clear base, and they have swirls of black and purple that kind of give an appearance of like a smokiness inside the die. The numbers were also originally gold, and I repainted them to silver. You might notice I have an affinity for silver over gold. So I just felt that that suited her character better. And the reason that I picked these dice is that the black and purple kind of mixing together gives sort of a representation of the warring natures inside 6. You know, the black for like that darkness, and then the purple for her true self, and kind of represents the color of her eyes. One detail I will include from the campaign is that she eventually found out that her name was Violet. She was named after the color of her eyes, and her sister's name was Daisy. So that is 6. And we'll give her a nice roll. Another 12. I guess that works because she was supposed to be 12 years old when the campaign started anyway. I feel like it spanned a couple of years. There we go. That is 6. Now we have Tanwyn. Tanwyn is a Fire Genasi fighter, and her subclass is Echo Knight. So she can like summon an echo of herself to fight alongside of her. Tanwin has what is an almost medium dark human skin tone, but it's a little more red. Her hair is dark at the top and then fades into red, orange, and finally yellow at the ends, like a fire. She has lots of piercings, including her septum, eyebrow, a few in each ear. And I think she's a bit shorter than average and very strong, but not like a lean strength, more of like a bulky strength. Her primary weapon is a long sword. She's very confrontational and can be a little cagey. Kind of believes that people are against her until they've proven otherwise. But once they do, she is extremely loyal. She's got a bit of a temper, but she wouldn't be the person to start a bar fight, although she would absolutely be the first person to join one. She definitely has problems with authority. I don't have too much of a backstory for Tanwin because I played her in a campaign with 7 other players and didn't really think we'd have the time to expand on backstories. I knew it would never be relevant, but she did used to be part of the city guard, and based on her personality, I'm sure you can guess that did not end well for her. She definitely spent an overnight or 2 in the detention block before she was fired, basically. These dice are orange base with shimmer, and maybe you can see, maybe not, wisps of red. This one has a good wisp near the top, up here. Wisps of red throughout, and there's white numbering. I pick these dice basically because they look like fire. I think the mix of the orange with the red, kind of wispies, is the bright color, and the shimmer almost makes them look like they're glowing. If I hold them up to the light, I feel like they're really nice and reflective. So let's give a roll for Tanwin. Ooh, 5. 5, 5, 5. I'll pop these back in their little box. Now we have Valvari, and Valvari is also a tiefling, and she is a rogue assassin. Valvari has medium purple skin and long white hair. Her horns go like up and over her head and point backwards, kind of like a gazelle, but like much shorter. She's very clean and well kept, but not fancy. She generally wears leather armor. Her main weapons are a rapier and throwing daggers. She is very street smart, but a little chilly, and has a serious case of RBF, except it's not just resting. She's the kind of person that would do her makeup in the reflection of a dagger, just to be intimidating. And she will not be dragged down by others' incompetence. She's the most lone wolf type character that I've played, but wanting to be a good player, I made sure she had good motivation to stay with the party as well. I genuinely do not have a backstory for Valvari. I didn't play her for very long. was for when my D&D group was trying out a pre-written module. But we kind of found out we like doing original content better. So if anyone has any ideas based on her description for a backstory, let me know. I played her in Dungeons of the Mad Mage, if that's relevant. So these dice are like a very pale light purple base with a periwinkle shimmer, kind of not evenly distributed without, but all the way throughout. And they've got silver numbers. Again, I'm sensing a theme with myself here with the silver numbers. So Valvari is purple, like the dice. And I think that the kind of blue-toned shimmer gives off a cold vibe, like her personality, but they also, these dice read very, like, feminine to me, and she's one of my more feminine characters. Definitely likes a good winged eyeliner, Valvari does. Okay, let's see what Valvari rolls. Man, not doing great now. That's a 4. Just a 4. Too bad. I am well known for rolling absolutely garbage. I did one time manage to roll a total of 15 damage for a 4th level fireball. If anybody knows the math on that, I looked it up, and apparently it was like a 0.012% or something like that chance that I would roll that low on the damage, which I understand, statistically has to happen sometime, but it was really unfortunate because I was playing a warlock, so I only had 2 spell slots, and I used one of them to do 15 damage with a fireball. Yeah, too bad. Now we have Yana. She is, I think, one of my favorite characters to roleplay as, just because it's so fun. She's a half-orc barbarian, path of the wild magic. Very tall. Maybe not super tall for a half-orc, but taller than your average human. Very muscular, of course, being a barbarian. And with greenish skin. She has tusks, but she does keep them filed down because she knows that they can make a lot of people uncomfortable. She has wavy black hair that is longish, but it's shaved on one side and doesn't wear armor or sleeves. She does, however, have 2 gold rings that she wears on her thumbs, and they are the only thing that she has from her past. She generally dresses in pretty neutral brown neutral brown colors, whatever's available in her size, though she could be convinced to wear a nice dress for a special occasion as long as she can run in it and it doesn't obstruct her ability to swing her axe. So she does fight with a great axe. And she's very fun-loving and affable. Likes to laugh and joke around. But she knows she can be kind of scary to people, so she puts in an effort to be disarming. She can't resist a good competition, and she does not start fights, but will finish them if you are stupid enough to try. She's also more observant and better at reading people than many would give her credit for, and she can be quite empathetic as well. So, Yana doesn't know it, but she is actually a a noble on both of her parents' sides. And she wasn't accepted by either side, the human side or the orc side. So instead she was raised by a bunch of mercenaries that found her abandoned as a baby. So she's used to being around the rough and tumble type. Eventually she was kicked out of this mercenary band for beating one of the higher-ups when he drunkenly challenged her to a fight, I guess for his own pride. And he got absolutely demolished, of course. So now she is wandering alone with her muscles for hire until she joins her adventuring party. So the dice here have pretty natural colors. There's a clear base with a lot of rust-colored swirls and then some white and darker brown. It's white numbering here, and on the D12 and the D20, the high face is actually an axe. You can see better, it's a little bigger on the D12. So the D4 actually is also a really interesting shape. Usually it's a triangular base pyramid, but this one's almost like a squared off capsule shape, which I think is cool. No stabbing yourself in the foot with that one when you drop it off the table. And I picked these dice because I think the natural colors represent Yana's style. And obviously the tiny axe is just perfect for a barbarian like Yana. And I think the slight campiness of having the axe on the high faces is just very, indicative of her fun-loving personality. So let's see what we roll here with Yana's dice. 16, that is pretty good. 16, really close to that 20, but it eludes us. I played Yana for definitely not the longest campaign. That was with 6, but a while. And it was the first time that one of my brother-in-laws joined us for our campaign, so it was nice to have another person playing with us. So before that, it was just me, my brother, my husband, and my father is the DM. So family D&D. But more recently, the campaign that I'm playing Danny in, my brother-in-laws have joined us, and one of my brother-in-law's girlfriends has joined us as well. So we've got a bigger group, and it's a lot of fun playing with more people. To finish up, I have 2 honorable mention characters, I guess. They're not really super fully developed characters, and you'll see why when I talk about each one of them, but the first one is Bortha Willowsapper. So she was a bit of a silly character that I put together for a one-shot I played last Christmas, and where we just tried to do really weird combat combinations at a high level, so just for some fun. Bortha is a dwarf, and she is a barbarian path of the world tree for 14 levels, and has 2 levels of rogue. I think the combination of rogue barbarian is very funny. So took those 2 levels in rogue basically just to get sneak attack and cunning action. So I'm going to get a little bit D&D technical for the next couple of minutes for those who are interested. If not, hopefully you're asleep by now. So the combination was pretty wild. The barbarian subclass that I picked, Path of the World Tree, had a feature that requires you to use a weapon with the versatile property, and then using sneak attack requires either a ranged weapon, which I'm not going to use as a barbarian, or a weapon with the finesse property. So I had to scour the archive, and I think there ended up being literally one weapon that we could find that was both versatile and finesse, called the Sunblade. So that was kind of fun, but with all my features and such added together on my regular attacks, if I was raging, I did a d10 plus a d8 plus 9 was my modifier, plus 3 as my rage damage bonus for each of my 2 attacks. And then on one of my attacks, I could add an additional 1d10 and a 1d6 for my sneak attack. Plus I had a feature where I could re-roll 1s and 2s on my damage dice if I was using a 2-handed weapon, which is why another reason why I needed that versatile property. So if I hit both attacks on a turn, which I mostly was because I had advantage from reckless attack and I had plus 14 to hit, I was able to do a bare minimum of 28 damage per turn, if my math is correct, but an average of 52. And that average is not including how much the average goes up for rerolling 1s and 2s once, because my statistics knowledge is not good enough to get that complicated. But so an average of 52 damage per turn, which I thought was pretty good. I know it's definitely not the most min-maxed build out there, but I thought it was quite fun. And the extra d8s from the Sunblade, if you're wondering. Alright. So, anyway, I'm done with the technical tangent there. Bortha is a very old dwarven woman with skin so wrinkly and sun-leathered that it resembles the bark of a tree. Her gray hair is wild and full of sticks, moss, and she decorates it with flowers. She has a huge, relative to her body size, tattoo of a tree on her back. When she rages, her arms extend out like branches around her sword, increasing her reach, and she may be old, but she is very speedy. With a very brisk walking pace, her base walking speed is 40 feet, and she can also teleport around as a bonus action while she's raging, which is very fun. So, her primary weapon, as I said, is a Sunblade longsword, which I feel like kind of fits the tree motif pretty well. So she comes off as a sweet old lady, but in fact is quite willing to slap you silly and steal your snacks. She's definitely not quite all there anymore, either from age or being hit in the head too many times, but in the heat of battle you can count on her to be focused and deliver a walloping. She does not have a backstory, not for a one-shot anyway, but I think she would be really fun to play in a more serious campaign. I actually really enjoyed the mechanics of the World Tree Barbarian. It could also be because there were so many cool features because we were playing at a high level. I'm not sure how it would be at lower levels, but I definitely recommend you check it out. It's a pretty cool subclass, and it definitely has really good role play potential. So I don't actually have specific dice that I've assigned to Bortha since she is only for a one-shot. However, I have chosen to show you these tiny dice in in lieu of her own specific dice, on account that she is a dwarf, so she's small. And I thought it would be nice to have a bit of a change in the pitch tone of the sounds that the dice make for the video. So let's give this tiny d20 a roll. Oh, that's hilarious. So I got a natural 20 for Bortha's tiny dice. Thanks, Bortha. Oh my goodness. Alright. The last character that I have to share with you today is named Trinry Spirit Rider. I had to store her dice way over to the side because my case was full. So Trinry is a halfling. She's a wizard of an unknown subclass, and that is because Trinry was my very first D&D character. My very first. And when I played her, the people I was with, none of us had ever played before, didn't know the rules, didn't know how to make characters, didn't even really understand how to use spell slots. But, so Trinry was a young adult when I played her, but in my mind now, she is an old lady. She has aged since then. It just feels appropriate. So since, I've evolved in my D&D career knowledge. But in my, pantheon of my characters in my head, she's kind of like everyone's grandma who tells them stories of her adventuring days and bakes them cookies, but other than that, I really don't remember much about her, which is why she was an honorable mention. I don't even really have a backstory or personality for her, but I like to think she was a bit of a mischievous trickster in her youth, and still carries that sparkle with her now. As a wizard, I'm sure her primary weapon was her magic, but like I said, no personality or backstory to be heard of. But these dice aren't really assigned to Trinry. I hadn't started my dice collection when I played her, but I thought they were fun and kind of represent her. So we have a clear base with a green bottom, and inside is a little turtle. From the top you can see the turtle from the side there, this little guy, and got silver numbers. So I just picked them to show to you because I thought they were cute and unique, but also since Trinry's short and old now, I'm sure she's quite slow, though she probably uses magic to zip around somehow. Alright, what do we roll for Trinry? Little turtle guy. 13. Not a bad number to finish off. I guess if you're superstitious, maybe it is. 13. Alright. So that was the last set of dice I had to show you, the last character I had to talk about. We rolled one natural one, their very first roll, and our second to last roll was a 20, so I feel like those are good, pretty good bookends to the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed my D&D character lore and seeing some of my dice collection. I actually have 3 more of these 3x4 containers filled. They're all filled basically with dice. So they don't have any characters associated with them or anything. They're just my collection. But if you'd like to see more, let me know and I'd be happy to share. And with that, I hope you've had a lovely time